Imagine standing at the edge of the Nile River over 4,000 years ago. Around you, colossal stone pyramids pierce the heavens, statues of gods watch silently, and the whispers of a civilization that mastered architecture, astronomy, and the very art of immortality echo through time. This is not just history. It's the story of a people who defied death, who built wonders that still baffle scientists today. Welcome to the world of ancient Egypt. In this cinematic journey, we will unravel the grand saga of ancient Egypt, from its mysterious beginnings to its golden age of pharaohs, from the secrets of the pyramids to the decline of one of history's greatest civilizations. Along the way, we'll uncover fascinating facts, surprising myths, and timeless lessons that continue to shape our world. So whether you're a history lover, a curious traveler, or someone who simply wonders how an ancient people carved their name into eternity, stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you won't just know the history of Egypt, you'll feel like you've lived it. Music swells and fades into the sound of river water flowing. Section 1. The Gift of the Nile. Let's begin at the very source, the lifeline of Egypt, the Nile River. The Greek historian Herodotus once said, "Egypt is the gift of the Nile." And he was right. Without the Nile, Egypt as we know it would never have existed. Picture it, a harsh desert stretching endlessly, and then, like a ribbon of life, the Nile cutting through, bringing fertile soil, fresh water, and food to its banks. Every year, the Nile would flood, leaving behind rich, black silt that made farming possible. Imagine ancient farmers waiting eagerly for the waters to rise, knowing their entire future depended on it. The river wasn't just water, it was a god, a provider, a calendar, and a highway all in one. Boats filled with grain, stone, and treasures sailed along it, connecting Upper and Lower Egypt, north to south. Isn't it fascinating how one river could give birth to a civilization that would outlast thousands of others? Section 2. The Rise of the Pharaohs. Now let's step back in time to around 3100 BC. Two lands existed, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. For centuries, they were separate kingdoms, until one ambitious leader changed everything. His name, Narmer, also known as Menes. He united Upper and Lower Egypt, becoming the first pharaoh of a unified kingdom. And with that single act, a 3,000-year dynasty began. Think about it. While most civilizations in the world were still experimenting with small villages, Egypt was already building a centralized state led by a god-king. Yes, you heard that right. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler. To the Egyptians, he was divine, the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon god, destined to maintain Ma'at, the balance of truth, justice, and cosmic order. This belief gave the pharaoh immense power, but also immense responsibility. Can you imagine the pressure of not just ruling a kingdom, but keeping the universe itself in harmony? Section 3. The Age of Pyramids. And then came the age that still captures our imagination, the Pyramid Age. Around 2600 BCE, during the Old Kingdom, pharaohs began constructing tombs unlike anything seen before. Why pyramids? To the Egyptians, death wasn't the end. It was a doorway to eternity. And if you were a pharaoh, you needed a house for eternity, grand enough to honor a god. The first step pyramid was built for Pharaoh Djoser by his brilliant architect, Imhotep, often considered the first recorded genius in history. His design at Saqqara was revolutionary. Instead of a simple mastaba, he stacked layers, reaching toward the sky. This idea would evolve into the smooth-sided pyramids we know today. Then came the giants of Giza, Khufu's Great Pyramid, standing at nearly 480 feet tall, built with over 2 million stone blocks. Just pause for a moment. No modern cranes. No trucks. Just sheer human ingenuity and willpower. Scientists still debate exactly how it was done. Ramps, levers, or perhaps methods we've yet to rediscover. And here's a fun fact. For almost 4,000 years, the Great Pyramid was the tallest man-made structure on Earth. Can you imagine medieval Europeans staring at their tiny castles compared to this mountain of stone built millennia earlier? Sound of chisels and hammers echo, blending into solemn music. Section 4. The Middle Kingdom, Egypt Reborn. But no civilization shines forever without shadows. After the glory of the Old Kingdom, Egypt entered a period of chaos known as the First Intermediate Period. Central authority collapsed, regional governors fought for power, and famine spread as the Nile's floods became unpredictable. Yet, from the ashes rose a new chapter, the Middle Kingdom, around 2050 BC. Pharaoh Mentuhotep II of Thebes reunited Egypt, restoring stability. What's fascinating about this era is the shift in mindset. The Old Kingdom had been all about the godlike pharaoh and monumental pyramids. But in the Middle Kingdom, pharaohs were seen as shepherds of their people, protectors rather than untouchable deities. The literature of this time, tales like the story of Sinew, reveals Egyptians wrestling with questions of loyalty, mortality, and morality. It was almost like a cultural awakening, a humanization of their leaders and themselves. And here's a fun surprise. Pyramids didn't vanish, but they became smaller, less perfect, even using mud brick instead of pure stone. Why? Some say resource shortages, others say practicality. Either way, the Middle Kingdom reminds us that even giants must adapt or risk collapse. Section 5. The New Kingdom, the Age of Empire. Then came Egypt's Golden Age, the New Kingdom, roughly 1550 to 1070 BCE. If the Old Kingdom was the age of pyramids, the New Kingdom was the age of empire. This era saw warrior pharaohs expand Egypt's borders like never before. Think of names like Thutmose III, the Napoleon of Egypt, who led 17 military campaigns and extended Egypt's reach into Syria and Nubia. But not all rulers were warriors. Some were visionaries. Take Hatshepsut, one of history's first great female rulers. She wore a false beard to legitimize her reign, but her power came not from conquest, but trade. Her famous expedition to the land of Punt brought back exotic treasures, incense, ivory, even live baboons. Imagine the wonder in Thebes when her ships returned, loaded with goods no Egyptian had ever seen. And then came Akhenaten, the pharaoh who dared to rewrite religion itself. He abandoned Egypt's many gods for the worship of a single deity, Aten, the sun disk. Was this the world's first experiment with monotheism? Perhaps, but it didn't last long. After Akhenaten's death, the priests of Ammonius restored the old gods with a vengeance. And in the shadows of this turmoil came a boy king whose name would echo louder in modern times than perhaps any other, Tutankhamun. Ironically, his short reign was insignificant compared to his peers, but the discovery of his nearly intact tomb in 1922 made him immortal in the eyes of the modern world. Isn't it strange how history sometimes remembers the forgotten and forgets the remembered? Section 6. Daily life in ancient Egypt. But what about ordinary Egyptians? After all, a civilization isn't built by pharaohs alone. It's the farmers, the artisans, the scribes, and the soldiers who carried it forward. Let's imagine a day in the life of a farmer. He wakes before dawn, offering a quick prayer to the gods. His family works together to tend wheat and barley fields nourished by the Nile's floods. Tools are simple, wooden plows pulled by oxen, but the cycle of planting and harvesting is as steady as the river itself. For artisans, Life meant chiseling stone, painting tomb walls, or weaving linen. Their art wasn't just decoration, it was magic, a way to ensure the deceased's soul reached the afterlife. Did you know the colors they used weren't random? Green symbolized rebirth, blue symbolized the Nile and the heavens, red symbolized power and chaos. Every brushstroke had meaning. And then there were the scribes, the intellectual elite. In a world where most couldn't read or write, scribes held the keys to knowledge. They recorded taxes, laws, and prayers, ensuring Egypt's memory lasted forever. One ancient text even bragged, "A scribe's work is more enduring than fine linen, than a house in the West, than a tomb in the desert." They weren't wrong, were they? After all, their words still speak to us across 4,000 years. Section 7. Gods, Myths, and the Afterlife. Of course, we can't talk about Egypt without diving into its gods. Religion was the very heartbeat of Egyptian life. There was Ra, the sun god, who sailed across the sky by day and through the underworld by night. Isis, the mother goddess, who protected magic and family. Osiris, the ruler of the underworld, murdered by his jealous brother Set, only to be resurrected by Isis and become the judge of souls. But perhaps the most gripping belief was in the afterlife. To Egyptians, death wasn't the end, it was a continuation. But to reach paradise, one's heart had to be judged in the Hall of Ma'at. Imagine standing before Osiris as your heart was weighed against a feather of truth. If it balanced, you earned eternal bliss. If not, your heart was devoured by the fearsome Ammit, part lion, part crocodile, part hippo. This belief gave rise to mummification, the process of preserving the body so the soul could recognize it in the afterlife. Organs removed, body dried with natron salt, wrapped in linen, placed in a sarcophagus, and surrounded by amulets for protection. Think of it as the most elaborate travel insurance policy in history. And here's a detail I love. Egyptians included everyday items in tombs: bread, beer, sandals, even board games, because they believed the dead would actually need them. Can you imagine stepping into eternity with your favorite game of Senet under your arm? Section 8. Temples, Monuments, and Achievements. Beyond pyramids, Egypt left behind a skyline of temples and monuments that still take our breath away. If the pyramids were houses for eternity, temples were homes of the gods themselves. Take Karnak, for example. It wasn't just one temple. It was a city of worship built over 2,000 years, with towering obelisks, colossal statues, and the hypostyle hall, its forest of 134 giant columns. Standing among them, you feel like an ant in a stone jungle designed for giants. Or Abu Simbel, carved directly into a cliff by Pharaoh Ramses II. For colossal statues of the pharaoh guard its entrance, each nearly 70 feet tall. What's incredible is that in the 1960s, when the rising waters of the Aswan Dam threatened to submerge it, the entire temple was cut into blocks and moved piece by piece to higher ground. Even modern technology trembled before ancient genius. But Egypt's achievements weren't only architectural. They excelled in medicine, performing surgeries, setting broken bones, and writing medical papyri filled with herbal remedies. They advanced in astronomy, aligning temples to solstices and pyramids to the stars. Even their calendar, based on the heliacal rising of Sirius, became the foundation for the 365-day year we still use today. Have you ever thought about it? Every time you glance at your calendar, you're living with a gift from ancient Egypt. Section 9. The Pharaoh of Pharaohs, Ramses II. No name embodies Egyptian grandeur more than Ramses II, also called Ramses the Great. Reigning for 66 years, he was a warrior, builder, and self-promoter like no other. He fought the famous Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, one of the earliest battles in history with detailed records. Though it ended in a stalemate, Ramses carved inscriptions boasting of his victory across temples, reminding us that ancient propaganda was alive and well. But it wasn't just war. Ramses built cities, temples, statues, so many that later generations joked he left no stone uncarved with his name. His mummy, discovered in the 19th century, reveals he lived into his 90s, remarkable for the time. Can you imagine? A pharaoh who outlived most of his children, ruling into an age where many of his subjects were 3 generations younger. To his people, Ramses wasn't just a king, he was Egypt itself, enduring, eternal. Even today, when tourists stand before his statues, it feels as though his gaze hasn't softened in 3,000 years. Section 10. Queens of Power, from Nefertiti to Cleopatra. But history is never only about kings. Egypt's queens carve their own legacies, often in times of turbulence. Nefertiti, the wife of Akhenaten, wasn't just a consort, she was his co-ruler. Her famous bust, now in Berlin, is perhaps the most iconic face of ancient art, serene, elegant, immortal. Some believe she even ruled Egypt after Akhenaten's death under a different name. Then there was Hatshepsut, who we met earlier. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri is a masterpiece, blending seamlessly into the cliffs of Thebes. She commissioned obelisks, trade expeditions, and grand projects, proving women could wield power equal to any man. And finally, Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh. Unlike Hollywood's portrayal, Cleopatra wasn't just a seductress. She was a polyglot, a strategist, and a master politician. Facing the rising power of Rome, she aligned with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony, trying desperately to preserve Egypt's independence. But when Octavian, later Augustus, defeated Antony, Cleopatra chose death by her own hand, famously through a snakebite, rather than live as a Roman trophy. With her death in 30 BCE, Egypt's age of pharaohs ended. But Cleopatra's legend lived on, inspiring poets, painters, and filmmakers for centuries. Doesn't it make you wonder, was she the last pharaoh, or the first true celebrity? Section 11. Writing and Wisdom, the Gift of the Scribes. Another pillar of Egypt's greatness was writing, hieroglyphics. These weren't just words, they were art, carved into stone, painted on papyrus, etched on temple walls. Hieroglyphs carried Egypt's memory across millennia. The Rosetta Stone, discovered in 1799, became the key to unlocking this lost language. With Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic scripts carved side by side, scholars finally cracked the code. Imagine the thrill of reading words last spoken 2,000 years earlier, names of pharaohs, prayers to gods, poems of love. And it wasn't all religious or political. Egyptians wrote love songs, jokes, even satirical texts. One papyrus mocks a lazy student. A donkey is better than you, for it works without being beaten. It's a reminder that while their monuments were divine, their humor was very, very human. Writing gave Egypt continuity. Dynasties rose and fell, but the words of scribes stitched their history into eternity. Section 12. The Decline of Ancient Egypt. Every empire, no matter how mighty, eventually faces decline. Egypt was no exception. After the splendor of the new kingdom, cracks began to appear. Internal strife, weak pharaohs, and the ever-growing influence of priests destabilized the state. Meanwhile, foreign powers looked hungrily at Egypt's wealth. First came the Libyans, then the Nubians, who at one point even ruled as pharaohs in the 25th dynasty. Imagine that, kings from the south embracing Egyptian culture so completely they were buried in pyramids of their own. But the real storm arrived with the Assyrians, fierce warriors who invaded Egypt in the 7th century BCE. Though Egypt pushed back, the land was never quite the same. Soon after, the Persians conquered Egypt, folding it into their vast empire. Then, in 332 BCE, a young Macedonian general marched in, Alexander the Great. Welcomed as a liberator, he founded the city of Alexandria, which would become a beacon of knowledge with its legendary library. But Egypt was now a province of foreign empires, not the master of its own destiny. Finally, Rome arrived. After Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE, Egypt was absorbed as Rome's breadbasket, its grain feeding the growing empire. The pharaohs were gone. The temples grew silent. And yet, Egypt's story was far from over. Section 13. The Legacy of Ancient Egypt. So what remains of ancient Egypt today? More than stone and sand, its influence ripples through time. The Romans adopted Egyptian symbols, building obelisks that still stand in Rome and Paris. Early Christians borrowed imagery of the Madonna and Child from statues of Isis and Horus. Even the idea of life after death, of judgment before a divine throne, echoes in modern religions. And then the rediscovery. In 1798, Napoleon's soldiers stumbled across the Rosetta Stone. Decades later, scholars cracked hieroglyphics, opening a window to voices long silent. Archaeologists like Howard Carter electrified the world with the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, a moment that sparked Egyptomania across the globe. Even today, Egypt inspires our films, books, and imaginations. From mummies in Hollywood to pyramids in video games, the ancient kingdom lives on, not just as history, but as myth and magic. Think about it. How many civilizations can you name that still inspire wonder after 5,000 years? Egypt's story is not just in the past. It's part of humanity's present and perhaps its future. And so the story of ancient Egypt comes to a close, yet not really. The Nile still flows. The pyramids still rise above the desert. The same sun that warmed the face of Ramses still warms ours. Egypt reminds us that civilizations may fall, but their spirit can endure forever. The pharaohs built to defy time, and in a way they succeeded. Their monuments, their myths, their memory, they are eternal. Now let me ask you, what will we leave behind that last 5,000 years? If you enjoyed this journey through the sands of time, make sure to give this video a like. It helps more curious minds discover it. Subscribe if you'd like to explore more epic stories from history, and share this video with anyone who's ever gazed at the pyramids and wondered how. And I'd love to hear from you. What part of Egypt's story fascinated you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking, and keep the flame of history alive.